Classroom teachers test their students throughout the year. How can speech-language pathologists use the results of those tests or screeners that they are using to support students with developmental language disorders?
We talk about literacy and about reading as though it's this single construct, but it's actually this multidimensional, really dynamic thing that is dependent on the text and all these other skills that come into play. So I think what speech-language pathologists can do is think about the two main components of reading, which are decoding. And so that is the actual mapping of a sound onto a symbol. And, we can tell when a child is an early decoder because they read like the cat was, so there's a lot of effort being put into mapping that sound to the symbol. So that's decoding. In most schools, you have intervention specialists who are working with kids in reading in particular, if they've been identified as having a risk for dyslexia or a reading disability. But I think speech-language pathologists can complement that work in intervention by really simple things of mapping a letter onto a speech sound if you're working on speech sounds, by having the text of something written on a picture card that you're using instead of only showing the picture. There's a whole bunch of evidence around using storybooks in intervention and kind of helping the child to identify a letter on the page if you're seeing that some of their areas of weakness in the classroom are in decoding. So that is one way that we can complement the work that's happening, hopefully, in the classroom and by a reading interventionist. The other component that plays into literacy, in addition to decoding, is language, and that falls entirely in our purview. And so really working on complex syntax and compare contrast and some of these language structures that map on really nicely to text structure are good ways that we can boost the language skills of these kids that will help them as they begin to be exposed to more complex language in text. And then one other area is phonological awareness. So we use minimal pairs a lot in speech-language pathology. We can really be working on isolating sounds and getting kids to start being accustomed to the sounds that make up words. And I think attaching that eventually onto text is another way that, a lot of times we're already doing these things in practice, but we might not be realizing that they have sort of double duty in terms of their ability to help kids with their long-term reading skills too.